it's great to be here. Thank you for that introduction. This is a really unenviable position just before lunch and running 20 minutes late. I'm assuming won't be questions, but I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. So I'm going to start with a little context about, the MOU and the TOCCA agreements, is that they didn't just spring up out of nowhere. They're basically part of a big evolution. The municipal landscape has really changed over the last decade. The Municipal Act 2001, the City of Toronto Act 2006, and then the updates of those legislations really changed the role of municipalities and their relationship with the province. Gave them broad powers, gave them flexibility, gave them a lot more autonomy over their own affairs. And as a result, it was important to reflect that in the relationship with the province, because it really has evolved to more of a mature partnership between equals, much more collaborative than the more client kind of senior relationship that we used to have. And a key characteristic of that is this commitment to consulting. So the MOU was first signed in 2001, and it was not enshrined in legislation at that time. It was renewed in 2004 and strengthened, and with some more language about the range of things we had to consult on. And in 2005, it was made part of the Municipal Act. So there's actually a reference in the Municipal Act to this agreement. At the same time, there's a reference to having an agreement with the City of Toronto in the City of Toronto Act that was put in 2006. And TOCCA, that agreement, Toronto-Ontario Collaboration Agreement, was signed in 2008. So that's kind of a bit of the history of how it happened, and it really goes along with those new and really seminal pieces of legislation that we have in the province. So what is it? It commits the province, the MOU, and I'll have a little bit about TOCCA later. The MOU commits the province to prior consultation, and it's on proposed changes to legislation and regulation that have a significant financial impact on the current budget year or planning cycle, and also includes negotiation of agreements with the federal government on matters with direct municipal impact. And it excludes a whole lot of things: emergency situations, provincial budget items, First Minister's negotiations, etc. But those narrow words, what it includes, what it excludes, is really not fully what the MOU and TOCCA are about. They're much more about setting a framework and a spirit to work together. So even though it doesn't specifically include issues that have a policy impact, for example, those often come to the table. Things come to the MOU table a lot that aren't covered by that narrow definition, because it's really as well about the spirit of working with the municipal sector. And it's also, and I'll get into this a little bit more, it's only one of several consultation tools. Everything doesn't need to come specifically to a formal MOU table. But the fact that that table exists, again, is part of setting the framework for the relationship that we have. And we've heard today a lot about the kinds of other tables, big, significant, important tables, some of which were and are actually covered by and discussed at the MOU table, but they take on a greater role, because you just can't do everything in that kind of formal setting. So we've had, since I've been here, we've had discussions on housing and homelessness at the table, early learning, PMFSDR, social assistance, Ontario Works, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the key elements of it, it's basically, in its essence, confidential political consultation meetings, co-chaired by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the AMO President. So that's a really important thing to know, that the AMO MOU is a political table. And as I said, a lot of the consultations and discussions and larger things that we've been talking about today are where you roll up your sleeves and you get the work done, and it's the non-political, the bureaucrat table. But that political relationship goes back to what I said in the first slide. It reflects the maturity of the relationship and the need to have that kind of political leader to leader discussion. It's attended by provincial ministers. They have agenda items. The AMO executive sits there, the caucus chairs. Ministers bring their minister's office staff. Sometimes AMO makes presentations. It depends if there's something that that they think we need to hear about from them, but it is mostly our pre-consultation with them. There's a pre-meeting, that's really important, where the material is discussed ahead of time so that the people at the table, the AMO executive, et cetera, who sit at the table can be ready so that AMO staff have a chance to brief them ahead of time. And they're very strict on that. And they bring us to task if we don't get that material ahead of time because they want to have a good discussion at the table and they can't. I recognize that as someone who gets things late and doesn't have a chance to look at them sometimes. You can't give good input if you haven't had the material ahead of time. And it's important to note it's not a decision-making table. It's a table to get input. It's a table to get input and to get an early read and to get advice on how to proceed. And it's actually, in my opinion, extremely effective. And we'll get into that in a little more detail. So there's a lot of ways that issues get to the MOU table. And I will step back here a little bit, and I'm trying to talk really fast. This has been an evolution. Because there's a lot more interest and emphasis now over the last year in ministries bringing items to the MOU table for a lot of reasons. The government has become very active. The main one is the government has a lot of focus now on bringing legislation into the House, and so they're just doing a lot, so there's a lot of things that need to come there. Our new premier has really laid down the law with all her cabinet colleagues about working cooperatively with other ministries. Not that everybody doesn't, but she really wants to see evidence of it at the table, and she really wants to really put a lot of emphasis on the MOU. So there's a lot more interest. So we have a lot more ministries coming to us and saying, okay, we need to get on the agenda, we need to get on the agenda. But that's not the only way. We have a lot of relationships with other ministries. That's kind of our role, and we'll hear something happening and we'll say, when are you coming to the MOU table? I mean, ministries call us all the time to ask us for sort of the municipal advice, and we'll say, well, we can give you what we know, and we know a lot about the Act and things like that, but you need to talk to, and this looks to us like it should have a political check-in, or, maybe it's not. I mean, we often just say, call up the AMO staff for advice on whether they think this needs to be political now. Ministries may initiate it, we may initiate it. AMO themselves have got a lot of contacts, watch a lot of things, sit at a lot of tables, know what's going on more than us, and they'll get in touch with us and say, this is happening, we think it needs to come. And as I said, sometimes AMO presents. TOCCA's a little different. The agreement is signed, similar, it was signed a bit later, but 2008, but it works a little bit differently, and really that reflects that it's one government as opposed to an organization that represents a whole broad range of governments. So it really does function somewhat differently. It's a two-way agreement, as I said. The TOCCA process is much more decentralized. We assume that ministries are working with who they need to work with in the city on a regular basis, and that they don't need to flow through this process as much. But we do have regular meetings. We try to meet a couple of times a year. And kind of touch base. Well, often and these are at the staff level. The CAO comes and he'll often give an update on the budget. We'll do the same. There'll be kind of a touch base on all the big files that people are working on, so it does work a little bit differently. And I said it does reflect the fact that it's a one-on-one as opposed to what AMO has to do, which is reflect the interests of a broad range of municipalities, which is why you need, I think, that political check-in quite a bit more. So it's deputy ministers on our side and senior officials on the Toronto side. So just a little bit about the benefits, although I think we've been covering them a lot, and I think that they are really quite significant. Obviously, it allows for better policy development and exchange of information early, so that I think Monica stole the term I was going to use, avoid perverse outcomes. You want to know if you think this is a great idea, and often you'll be working with a particular set as a ministry, a set of stakeholders, and you've sort of missed the broader implications. And because AMO has such a broad spread, and TOCCA, the senior people at the city, you can get much more perspective. It also promotes kind of a horizontal way of looking at policy. It forces us in the province to look more broadly at things, because AMO has that broad perspective. It allows us to better anticipate what concerns there are going to be. So from a communications and a rollout point of view, it's really important. I think a really significantly important piece is that it's a catalyst for further and other kinds of discussion. And that's, I think, what we saw through all the previous presentations that we had here, the PMFSDR and the PEMSEC and the HSIC, got them all, were really side tables that grew out of this. This set the framework for that. And those were very rich and deep relationships and really good processes. And this kind of formal MOU process really didn't allow for that to happen. It may have happened anyway, but I think it set the kind of overall framework for a relationship that contribute to that. And as I said, I think the horizontal piece, I think looking at things through a municipal lens is critically important. I think ministries understanding that it isn't just good enough to talk to the group of municipal staff across, who have organized themselves into the Roads Association because they have a particular interest, but you need to get that political check-in. So that's, like I said, I think it really does help our policy development, and it does help our relationship. I wasn't going to talk a lot about the cone of silence, but that was my intro. I do have one slide here. Confidentiality is obviously part of this. It's entrenched in both agreements. I think it's referenced occasionally, but it kind of goes without saying at the table when we have the political to political discussions. We're bringing things there early. Thank you. We're bringing things there early. It also applies to many of the tables that happen outside of the actual formal, and that is kind of on a case-by-case basis. So obviously, if you're going to have that open dialogue, if you're going to be in government to government, you need that confidentiality. The rest is how it works in practice. I have 1 minute. I forgot to go through my slides. Examples under this one, I'm rushing through here, are that several initiatives that we've brought forward. I've already mentioned these. Social assistance, childcare modernization, employment and training has been there a few times. Early years has been there. So I will just recap. We have a different relationship with the municipal sector because of the huge changes to the role and the autonomy and the flexibility, the authority of our municipal governments, the maturity of our municipal governments. So the MOU agreements really reflect that. The province is committed to working through these. We feel we're a leader in this relationship. But it all takes a lot of work on everybody's part to roll up your sleeves and really make it work. It takes commitment from above, which we have right now. And it takes a lot of informal relationships. That was the slide that I skipped over, behind the scenes with all of us working together at places like this, and the relationships we have with AMO, the relationships our Ministry of Housing has with all of you and social services. And I'm just really optimistic that this relationship will only grow and that we'll have better consultation, and as a result, better policies and outcomes. So thank you, and I wish you well with your conference.